people ask all the time, okay, you consider yourself a recovered addict? You must be able to go to the bar and drink. You must be able to smoke a fat joint if you feel like it. Of course I am. I could do anything. But being a recovered person means I wouldn't want to make what is such a poor choice. I'm just going to call it like I see it. The bar, that place that stinks like stale beer that's been dropped on the floor, the place where people are going to hook up in really awful, meaningless sex, the place where people get unhealthy on a regular basis. I wouldn't choose to go to that place today. That wouldn't be my choice of environment that would make me joyful and feel like so happy to be alive.
My name is Eduardo, and originally from Mexico, but spent my entire life here in America, and feel like I came here to recover. I think it's missing from my culture, from my people. It was missing from my family, and some of my family hasn't made it due to recovery. And sitting in this circle reminds me just how much power there is to coming together with community. And we spoke a few months ago about this project, and immediately I said yes. Circles are big for me. Being in a circle, the name really resonated. And we met a few years ago, and I've kind of been bouncing in and out of what you're doing. And this is my first real anchoring into this community and to Recovery 2.0 and to your offerings. And I felt deeply moved and inspired to sit with the teachings coming through, and even hearing the conversations happening in this circle brought back a lot of memories that I hadn't thought about for a while. And I feel like I've been recovering my entire life. I feel like I spent most of my life searching for the right answer or the right way to say something so that I could understand. And I think I was a teenager when I recognized I was an addict, if you will. And since then, I've kind of dismantled that word and that paradigm. But what it meant to me at that time was that there was something stronger than everything within me that I had no control over. And it wasn't just me, it was people in my family, it was friends, family members. And being a teenager, I was very naive and hopeful. It's like, well, I'm not that. I didn't feel like I was that label or that definition. I looked it up in English, I looked it up in Spanish. I then kind of created my own definition for it so that I could develop a relationship with what was happening to me. It was like all around me, and I've always felt like learning is the most powerful thing that we can do, understanding something and sharing it. And so I went on a deep study with recovery and addiction and did 120 meetings in 120 days and tried every 12-step program, every recovery program, and then went and started working in recovery and providing services for people in active recovery, and spent about a decade of my life fully saying yes to all of it. And about halfway through, I remember feeling like there was something missing. It was like there was never what I perceived to be an invitation to initiate the 13th step. And this big book's been around for so long, and there hasn't really been an evolution that I feel like is quantum. And we're living in a quantum age. I've seen quantum experiences happening. And I was born the year that the internet came out, the World Wide Web. And I know that opened up this whole learning to there's more than what we think we know, and there's more to what we see. And so I made the decision to go into the beyond for me. Like I did the 12 steps, I did the meetings, I had a sponsor, I had some sponsees, I almost felt like I was going in this revolving door over and over again. And I don't know how or it happened, but that revolving door shifted into this stairway. Instead of going around the door, I took a step up, but it was like everything was different. And so I've seen what's happening here, and it's so exciting to be connected to other people who took that step. I feel like out of that revolving door and into this spiraling staircase. And my question, and it's come from just meditating a lot with one, it's hard for me to ask someone a question without me fully feeling like we're sitting in the same place with the same orientation. And so I always have like a pre-question to the question that's already been answered. But the question that always sat with me to arrive here was like, does anybody believe that it's possible to fully reprogram ourselves, to stop behaving in that way and to be fully clinically healed, having a physician sign off on that, and then personally feeling that way? And it sounds like you do believe that that's possible in this lifetime. So, my question to you is, what do you see for us in active recovery to look forward to in the beyond? What's here after you've kind of recovered, at least to a place where you feel whole enough to start living in this new quantum space of recovery, of life fully liberated from these psychological terms that are kind of put on top of us? And how can we clear the story to then move into this expression? And given your experience with your recovery and with all of the people that you've worked with, what do you see for people in the beyond? I would say maybe first step and a little bit more into that. Because for me, even going into the beyond felt like it went against everything that I was taught with traditional. They kind of tell you to stay here and you're safe, but you come here and it's not. And so, what do you see for someone who's just stepped into the beyond? And then, what do we have to look forward to maybe half a decade into this quantum healed, recovered way of being?
Thank you, Eduardo, so much for this amazing, incredibly well thought out inquiry. I'm so delighted. I'm so delighted to be here with you and to explore this. There is a group of people in the world, there have always been a group of people from the beginning of humanity to now, and I imagine it will be to the end of time. And this group of people can be characterized generally as living either literally or philosophically, metaphorically, at the edge of the village. And this group of people often have also been characterized as being alone, solo, not separate from in the deepest sense of that term, but geographically, metaphorically, in terms of their effort, their way of being in the world, they're at the edge and they're usually alone. And we refer to these people as shaman. That's one way that we refer. Some other traditions have used words like priest or priestess, a bunch of different terminologies. This group of people have been given access to different information than's available to the rest of the village. And so to villagers, these people can be, on the one hand, odd, strange, different. they can also be threatening, frightening. And then in the best cases, they can be magical, mystical, enlightened. They're the bringers of the information. They share this bandwidth of information that the others, mostly to a great extent, haven't had access to. They're not better than or less than anybody. Their role in the world is to be a go-between between this world and the spiritual element of this world. And as such, this group of people is unbelievably important, valuable. They help to awaken others who may be operating within a particular bandwidth. They help to expand that bandwidth. They help to make certain things possible for people that wouldn't be possible otherwise. We could call them, generally speaking, not just shaman or priests or priestesses, we could call them teachers. And we're living in a time right now where this group of people is desperately needed, critically necessary to decipher what's happening, what's needed for a time such as this, which can't be based necessarily completely in the physical. But this group of people, these teachers, they emphasize the unseen. They have a relationship with that which cannot be explained at a very deep level. It's a gift. It's a gift, meaning it comes naturally, and it's something that can also be developed and built upon, cultivated. You are one of those people. And you hold a tremendous responsibility because of it. On the one hand, you will experience, as you have, great challenge. The light and shadow aspects of this type of person that I'm describing. The light is when they are fully embodied, fully aware of themselves in the best way, fully clear on what they are and what they're not. They can experience aloneness, but not loneliness. They have access to a deep level of solitude and power and empowerment. And they can tolerate tremendous challenge. Like I'm thinking about an electrical wire that has a capacity to it. And this group of people, when they work on it, can really, they train themselves to be able to handle a high capacity going through that wire. They have a big life. They can handle it. They feel unbelievably deeply. There's an argument in my mind, a thought in my mind that everybody who's ever struggled with addiction in the ways that we have also fit into this group of people that have that level of sensitivity and therefore that level of responsibility once they're able to heal, to build that capacity, to recover themselves and to be able to direct their energies to plug into the world as a teacher. At first, before this recovery takes place, one can experience unbelievable loneliness. Unbelievable loneliness. when you come to the end of a teaching and it has been helpful to you, but the question that comes up from inside you is, I think I need something more, or I think I need something else, or where's the rest of the teaching? This wasn't everything that was necessary. Where do I go from here? That can be an unbelievably frightening place to be. When everybody who's been engaged in the teaching with you to that point says to you, if you leave here, you will perish. If you leave here, you're in the grips of addiction. If you leave here, you will relapse. And yet, on some level, that didn't feel accurate to you. And there was something inside you that compelled you to continue your search. And you have found so many modalities, and you have found a deeper level of truth for you in this search, which you've been brave enough to conduct at the edge of the village. On the 2nd of January in the year 2000, I also left. I stepped off the cliff into the unknown of whatever the next teaching would be. All I knew at that moment was I had received tremendous blessings from the teachings of the 12 steps and the community around them. And I had gotten relief from my core addictions, but that my spirit was calling for something more. And the reason I knew my spirit was calling for something more was because I was miserable. And it is very painful to be 9 years sober with no desire to use drugs or alcohol, legitimately no desire to use drugs or alcohol, but to be miserable. And yet it was one of the most important and sacred times of my life because I recognized once and for all that drugs and alcohol were obviously not the problem. They had become a problem, but they were not the core problem. They were the problem that I laid on top of the core problem. And when they were removed, the core problem started to present itself. And all that meant was I hadn't yet figured out something that was going to be very important for me to figure out about myself. And so I left consciously. And I had people in that community say to me the same things they said to you. You will not make it. But I had no choice. I couldn't stay. And they didn't understand that. And I couldn't explain it. I had to go, just like you had to go. And you found the things that you needed to find that helped you move forward into a deeper level of truthfulness for you. And so have I. The interesting thing for me in reflection is to look back and tell you that when I came into that community and I adopted the work of the 12 steps and I adopted a way of life, it made sense to me and it worked for me. Absolutely. At that moment, at that level of development, at that my level of consciousness and awareness and what I needed in that moment was that. And I would say, my name is Tommy, I'm an addict. My name is Tommy, I'm an alcoholic. Because that language was a reflection of truth for me in that moment, at that time. And perhaps one of the most difficult things for me to experience was to awaken to a point where that language was no longer truthful for me, because that was frightening. For 9 years, I've said to myself, I'm an addict, I'm an alcoholic. I've been told that that's important for me to say that, to never forget where I came from. I've been told once an addict, always an addict. I've been told you don't get over this in this life. And like you, that didn't ring as true for me. I needed to adopt that understanding for a period of time. And I moved forward in my life. I evolved in my understanding, and I started to understand something new. And in these new understandings, in this new consciousness, that language no longer applied. It was no longer correct for me to raise my hand and say, my name is Tommy, I'm an addict. My name is Tommy, I'm an alcoholic. It just didn't make sense. So what I did was I started to play around with language to come up with language that could work for me and just be more accurate. So things like, my name's Tommy. I would play around with different iterations. My name's Tommy. I've experienced addiction. I say, oh, that's true. I have experienced addiction in my life. Or my name's Tommy. I'm in recovery from. Later on, that would bring up a question. Is there ever a moment where I will be recovered? So I can say, oh, my name's Tommy. I'm a recovered alcoholic. That's true. My name's Tommy. I'm a recovered drug addict. That's true. And then that expanded into, I'm on a path of recovery. And for me, that just meant I was on a spiritual path where abstinence was the cornerstone. And we agreed to be truthful and to regard our own life and to learn everything we could from it. That's what it meant to be in recovery. Not that I was defining myself as a person that could no longer engage in a behavior that some part of me really wished I still could. Hi, my name's Tommy. I'm an addict. That means I used to be addicted to drugs. I sure wish I wasn't, so I could still do them. And so I'm defining myself as something that I can no longer do. I no longer get to do these things. I don't want to define myself that way. How about the choice? My name's Tommy. I would not choose to put those poisons, as I see them, into my body. At this level of development, they're no longer relevant for me. They don't help me get to where I need to go. They're no longer in alignment with the calling of my heart and the longing of my soul. So this very, very important exploration of language has been so important for me as I move forward down a path. And I just say that at the beginning, it was one way and now it's different, meaning different people need different things at different times. So when somebody comes on retreat with me and they raise their hand and say, my name's, Michael, my name's Donna, my name's Julie, my name's Fred, whatever it is, I'm an alcoholic. I say, oh, well, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. And I ask them at some point during the retreat, is that true? Is that true for you? And what do you mean by that? Do you feel you can heal yourself? And they'll say, no, no one can recover from this. And I'm like, wait a minute. And I direct them to the very first line of the very first edition of the very first preface of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which was the beginning of modern day recovery, where it says, we are 100 men and women who have recovered from this thing called alcoholism. And the purpose of this book is to show you exactly how we recovered. How do people miss that? Somewhere along the line, some group of people thought it was arrogant or not humble, or maybe people felt that you were lying to yourself when you said, I'm a recovered alcoholic. That's not something that you can really test. Someone either feels that way or they don't. They're either being truthful about it or they're not. If they're not, it will play out over time. But of course you can recover. And so I think we have a problem in terms of language and communication in how we express to people what it is. What is this thing? Because to me, being in recovery, if you told me you were in recovery, I'd be like, oh my God, tell me everything. I want to know everything about you. How did you do it? What's going on in your life? How fantastic. So proud of you. Amazing. You hit the jackpot. How did you do it? That's what it means to me is, oh my God, you're on the spiritual path. Wow. You're into truth and rigorous honesty, and you look at your life and you're interested in being the best version of yourself. Oh my God, that's so rare in this world. How did you do it? I want to hear about that. So you see this concept of exploration, innovation, accessing greater information, the very concept of healing or recovering. What does that mean? People ask all the time, Tommy, okay, you consider yourself a recovered addict? Well, if you're recovered, you must be able to go to the bar and drink. You must be able to smoke a fat joint if you feel like it. I'm like, of course I am. I could do anything. But being a recovered person means I wouldn't want to make what is such a poor choice, such an awful low-grade choice for how I would decide to go through life. If I wasn't recovered, the bar, I'm just speaking for me. This is not to put anybody down. I'm just going to call it like I see it. The bar, that place that stinks like stale beer that's been dropped on the floor, the place where people are going to hook up in really awful, meaningless sex, the place where people get unhealthy on a regular basis and put about 1,000 to 5,000 really shitty calories into their body. Yeah. I wouldn't choose to go to that place today. That wouldn't be my choice of environment that would make me joyful and feel like so happy to be alive. Even though when I was a teenager, that seemed interesting to me. Now, you put some music in there, put some really high vibration activity and high vibration people in there. And I'm just talking about people who are like really interested in sitting down and talking and connecting, people who are interested in health and wellness. That's for me. Anybody listening to this will think, oh my God, you're such an arrogant, judgmental person. No, I'm just telling you what my preference is. I'm not above those people. I'm not below those people. It is not my preference any longer to be a person who goes to a bar any more than I'd like to go to a crack house or a heroin shooting gallery. I would like to place myself in environments that feel uplifting and connected to nature. Usually the outdoors is amazing. I like to be around people who love to really get the most out of life and enjoy life. I love to be around art and music. I love to be around culture and diversity. I love love. And I love people who love. And then some people might say to me, well, wait a minute, Tommy, wouldn't it be nice to have a glass of wine? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with any of it. See, you think I'm saying something's wrong with something. It's only wrong for me, from my perspective, from the way that I'm seeing the world. And if this resonates with you, then maybe it's wrong for you too, meaning it's not in alignment with what you want to be doing. So there's no judgment here. And I certainly don't judge people who engage in any activity. I suppose you're doing exactly the same thing I am. You're navigating the world and life as a human being, trying to do the best you can. Me too. Me too. We're all the same in this way. And we choose different methods. But to be recovered means I wouldn't choose to go back to those behaviors which are no longer relevant for my life today. And the glass of wine, which anybody could have with impunity and enjoy, and what a wonderful thing. I'm glad it exists in the world. I know it's great for some people from where they are, but not for me. Why don't I smoke cannabis today? Because I found through long-term cannabis use that it veils my consciousness. It dims my consciousness. It is not expansive to my consciousness. It puts constraints on my ability to think clearly, to focus, to concentrate, to develop a meditative mind, and to be able to see really clearly what's going on beyond this identity, this personality, my own preferences. Why don't I take psychedelics today? Seems to be all the rage once again. Isn't that great for people who have mental health issues? It might be. In some cases, absolutely. I know people who have taken psychedelics under therapeutic circumstances and had very positive results. Since I'm a recovered addict, Tommy, why are you not taking psychedelics? Because I have no desire to. I just don't want to. I don't know. It's not relevant for me. And so I don't. And so to me, being recovered, it doesn't mean that I'm not ever going to want or desire to do this or that or the other thing. I can't tell you what the future will bring. It just means that I'm being honest that those things just don't have relevance for me anymore. And, you know, I would quote Ram Dass, who I spoke with about psychedelic use and I spoke about all these things about language and all the stuff we're talking about now in recovery. And I said, he said, do you think psychedelics led you into drug abuse? And I said, no, I don't see it that way at all. And he's like, well, he said, I feel like psychedelics put me in the room with Jesus. But at the end of the night, I had to leave the room. And he said, now I'm in the room all the time. And then he goes, yeah. Just like that. He goes, yeah. And I believe it. I believed he was in the room with Jesus all the time. And that was not because of psychedelics. That was because of the blossoming of his consciousness through meditation and through contemplation and through all the work of his life and everything that went into his life. So, you know, for me, being healed, I'm free. That's what I mean. It doesn't mean I don't have good days and bad days. People misunderstand this all the time. Oh, you're free. You must never get stressed. You must never get angry. You must never, you know, no, you misunderstand the human condition. I'm not caught in the patterns and the conditioning of thinking that I once was. I'm here now. And from here, I still have my work to do. It's an ongoing evolution. Can a person heal from addiction? Of course they can. If that person returns to drinking in an addictive way, does that mean they're healed? Not to me. Have people healed themselves from certain addictions and still engaged in other behaviors that someone else might find addictive, but they don't? Sure. Is it any of my business? No. Do I believe in your ability to think clearly and to investigate your path for yourself as one of these designated shamans, Eduardo? I do. I have full faith in you to do your work and to live your life to its fullest purpose. Do I believe the same for Teresa? 1,000%. I am not in the business of trying to tell anybody what to do. What we are doing is we are reflecting upon our mutual experience. And we're talking about language and we're talking about constraints that we place upon ourselves. And we're talking about patterns and conditioning that we get stuck in as human beings, that we all do. And I have tremendous compassion. There are people who go to that bar that I put down, you know, in terms of made it really sound like a horrible environment, which to me it is. But it's like there are people who went to that bar and they found peace there for the first time in their life. And who would tell them not to go back? And why would they listen? If that's what they knew as peace. And so this brings me to the final piece of my exploration with this. Freedom is the thing to me. I need to see clearly. And what I once thought was clear thinking, I now recognize it was not. So that shows me that there's an evolution taking place. I saw things at one point, I had a certain level of awareness. I see things differently now. I have a different level of awareness. My work is to continue to refine and to expand that so that I can see things more clearly. I think that's everybody's work. If we are gripped onto our way of seeing things, it will be very difficult for us to learn and to grow. Most people are stuck in a pattern of thinking that happiness is what they feel when they relieve a craving. Most people think that happiness and freedom is what they feel when they've just relieved a craving for drugs or alcohol, a craving for approval, a craving for sex, a craving for money, a craving for a job, a craving for anything. That when they get the thing that they thought they wanted, the feeling that results, the satisfaction of the relief of that craving is what most people, they equate that with contentment. Ah, I'm happy now. But of course they're not. It's just momentary, based upon something that it's more based upon relief than it is upon the existence of harmony within and without. So if your only thought, if your only understanding of contentment is the way you feel when you relieve a craving, wouldn't you want to keep more and more cravings coming? So that you could relieve them and relieve them and relieve them and relieve them again and again and again and again. And that will become the karma of your life. You will live a life based on addiction in one subtle form or another. And your sense of joy will be the feeling, the fleeting feeling you get when you relieve the craving for that moment in time. And then you will begin it again. And so I applaud your search to break out of that way of thinking, to find a new language, to find a new experience, to find a new recovery that maybe nobody ever anywhere has ever found before. And then to report back from the edge of the village and say, I'd like to tell you a little bit about what I've found. Because there's a much deeper experience of life and joy, of truth and bliss than relieving craving after craving and calling it a life. So I'd like to ask what, arises for you, Eduardo, in this exploration. New questions, comments, anything that comes up for you.
The visual of the village and the circle was really powerful. That's what it's almost felt like, is the loneliness and the being alone. Because really what I found in all of this is solitude. It's like I finally learned how to be alone, and now everyone thinks there's something wrong with that. And so what I received from what you shared was understanding that it's a shift of consciousness, or maybe an expansion of consciousness, because it felt like I used to be screaming at people, asking them like, why can't you hear what I'm hearing or see what I'm seeing? And I've, especially through this conversation, recognizing that until you have an elevated state of being or a consciousness, you don't really see it for what it's becoming or what it is. the follow-up question that was coming through was like, how do we sustain these expanded states of consciousness and still honoring the path, the way forward, without really going back into, because sometimes this cultivates the expansion into this state of consciousness, and it almost feels like, how have you learned to sustain this level of consciousness or this expansiveness in a sustainable way, in a way that's reciprocal? Because sometimes it feels like it takes a lot to even get that step. And so that might not be sustainable or reciprocal to all of the systems. And so, what have you found to help support that expansiveness or that shift of consciousness?
Thank you so much, Eduardo. The yoga scriptures speak of two things that are necessary to progress along the path and to crystallize expansion as you move along the path. And the two things are, in Sanskrit, abhyasa and vairagya. So abhyasa can be defined as wholehearted steadiness of practice over time. Wholehearted steadiness of practice over time. So there's a commitment every day to show up and to practice. So specifically the practice of yoga meditation, but in a broader sense, the practice of being awake, that you're actually working at that. What are you doing today? I'm working at being awake. I'm working at being aware of myself. I'm working at thinking differently. And I'm playing with the stories that my mind throws up, knowing that those stories are not necessarily based in truth. And I'm working to move through, to bust through, to break through those stories into truthfulness and to be there. That commitment over time brings progress. The second part, vairagya, has to do with the release of two things. Sort of, I've heard it expressed as releasing attachment to outcome. So you do the practice without trying to get anywhere, which was, it's a very, 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 very difficult thing. Just to show up to practice, like for the joy and because that's what we do, without necessarily being attached to it leading somewhere specific. Like thinking, oh, I'll be enlightened someday, ooh, I could, have this power or that power. Oh, I'd get, just simply showing up, releasing our attachment to outcomes. Another way I've heard vairagya explained, the word literally means colorless, meaning the mind in its colorless state, meaning without preferences. So my idea of good and bad, I have to let that go. My right, wrong, let it go. Light, dark, let it go. Show up in practice and let it all go, and let my mind come into a balanced, colorless state where my preferences are no longer guiding all my actions and my thoughts, allowing true spontaneity to arise. So these are the two ingredients, if you will, in the scripture that they suggest, or they say, this is how it's done. This is how you can get there. Wholehearted steadiness of practice over time, and to release one's preferences and one's attachments. That will do it. Another quick story I'll share from a beautiful teaching from a beloved teacher of mine named Anand, who is in the Himalayas outside of Rishikesh. And it's a great story about how we learn and how we can stop the fluctuations as we expand to a new level of consciousness, how we can not drop back down and continue to experience these fluctuations up, down, up, down. We call that relapse, right? So how can we come to a new state of consciousness, but maintain it and then grow from there? So it's a wonderful parable about metaphor about how they dye cotton. So they take white cotton and they dip it in very deep color. And when they take the cotton out from the first dipping, in order to seal the color into the cotton, they have to lay it out in the sun. But when they lay it out in the sun, the color fades quite a bit. And so they have to take the cotton again once it's dried, and they dip it again into the deep, deep, deep color. And they take it out again to fix the color into the cotton, and they lay it out in the sun, and it fades again, but a little less than before. And they keep dipping the cotton and drying it in the sun, dipping the cotton and drying it in the sun until the color is at the depth that they want it to be, and it stays. It's fixed. And really, this is a great metaphor for any kind of learning. Specifically, though, for the purposes of our conversation, when we're talking about spiritual development, personal development, in this case, recovery from addiction or healing from any dis-ease in this way, we need multiple dippings. We need it again and again and again. And for sure, as I look back in my life of seeking and searching and evolving and learning and making mistakes and owning those mistakes and then making more mistakes and finding my way forward, I have learned in immersive experiences. They have been so important to me that I have needed multiple dippings, and I seem to still need them. So in the pandemic years here, many people stayed at home and they didn't do the things they normally do. I didn't get to India for these 3 years. Why is that significant? It's not necessarily just India, but it's what I do in India, who I'm exposed to in India, the depth of practice in India, the meditation that's available to me in India. And having not done that for 3 years, I can tell you that I feel something, and I can't wait to go to India this coming March. I needed another dipping for where I am. And that's just part of being a human being for me. As I told you, I'm interested, as I think we all are, in expanding. I'm going to need another dipping. And so I dip myself in practice. I dip myself in the presence of teachers. I dip myself in places where people are interested in the thing that we're speaking about here in the circle. And as long as I remain willing to do that and find ways to do that, I've noticed that I continue to expand and continue to move forward on my own evolutionary path. And I think anybody has that available to them in this way. So thank you for that follow-up question, and thank you for your presence. And I'm so grateful that we got to sit in circle today and have this exploration, and deeply meaningful for me.